Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure being with you today and seeing so many excited faces. It seems you had quite a few icebreakers already, so I guess you're already hyped up, so I don't have to take on that part. In terms of, to give you a bit of context, a bit of background, I'm kind of a hybrid between, on the one hand side, I founded an organization a few years ago called Sandbox, which brings together the most exciting young innovators below the age of 30 and helps them become real role models in their fields and gives them access to the resources and tools they need to really become good in what they're doing. We do that in 20 countries around the world, where we select people on the ground and then incubate them so that they make their ideas happen. My shadow life is at the LSE, where I teach entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship, where I'm co-leading the Innovation Lab. At the Innovation Lab, we look into how do business, how do entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, multinationals, how do they build their businesses, how do they scale, and particularly how do they bring in a certain impact element. So the whole question of how do you put meaning actually to what these organizations are doing. And what I'm going to talk today about, which feels important to such an interesting audience like you, is to talk a bit about how can we identify career paths, how can we identify ideas that are not going only towards the old traditional definition of success, which was money and professional career, but also how can we put a certain meaning to what we're doing, and how can we look back in 30, 40 years. It's the Mark Twain saying, you might know, which is that in 40, 50 years from now, you will not regret what you haven't done, or you will regret what you haven't done, but not what you've done. So you want to have a certain idea of, and we'll talk about that later, of how you can actually have an impact in this world while being really successful. In terms of my personal story, I hope this helps you to understand a bit why I'm such a big fan nowadays of really being more conscious about which career choices you make. I first studied the wrong way, and then hopefully now hope getting a bit more on the right track. When I was young, I grew up in Heidelberg, which is, who of you know where Heidelberg is? Enough? Okay, that's nice. I mean, it's more than usual. It's a kind of tiny old village somewhere in Germany where people used to say it's the perfect place to retire. So when you're kind of reaching the age of 60, 70, then that's the place to go. When you grow up there, it might be a bit boring sometimes. But because it was so boring, I always felt, well, I wanted to do something. I always felt, hey, there has to be something. So I kind of was quite self-centered and always, you know, did all these things like going partying and having a lot of fun and always kind of enjoying the pleasures of today, right? Not really thinking about the people around me. And I was really, really kind of egoistic and self-centered, and I still wonder how my parents endured that, how my friends endured that. For that, I'm eternally grateful. And I think the interesting thing was that when I turned 18, I got my first car. And this car didn't survive very long. So that was the car. I probably broke the unofficial world record of how many dustbins you can crash on your way to school. It's basically, I was basically transforming my reckless lifestyle to my driving style. So literally not taking care of anything, kind of just, you know, just driving and having fun. And then one day, I wasn't so fortunate anymore, and with 80 kilometers an hour, I crashed into 4 parking cars. Fortunately, no one in the cars, but 4 cars completely crashed. And I will never forget the moment when the policeman, who arrived at the accident like maybe half an hour afterwards, when he opened the window and said, "Wow, he's still alive." And this is a sentence I've dreamt quite a few times afterwards, because you know, when you put that in your mind that you were supposed to be dead, yet you're still here. And I think that was a very powerful reminder for me, because in these situations, you ask yourself these questions like, who would actually have come to my funeral and would have really cared? I mean, you know, whom did I actually touch? Whose life did I actually touch with what I'm doing? And I could relate then to a sentence of Steve Jobs. He had cancer and he died a few months, years ago now. And he said that death is life's greatest motivator. Because when you think about death, you face the idea that it will be over at some point, and you only use that time until then, you know? And it could be over every day, so why not using today? And what I was then thinking, contemplating over the last decade now, was how can I somehow understand what drives me as a person and what drives the people around me I care most about. And what I try to understand is, I never liked this whole idea of Generation Y, you know, this age group between 20 and 30 of people who are somehow supposed to be the same, but there is no the same, right? Some people are doing amazing stuff in social entrepreneurship, others are doing completely different things, others are freaks and destroy the world, whatever it is, right? It's no real cohesive thing. So what we try to do is trying to understand how can we get to the mindset of this new generation. And what we try to understand basically is what makes this generation Y question mark. So this new generation, I don't know how many of you think about that already now, or it comes maybe in a few years, but this idea that you ask questions of why you're doing what you're actually doing. You ask your professors, why do you actually think this is relevant what I'm doing here? You ask your boss, why do you think it's relevant what I'm doing here? And you have to ask yourself why it's actually relevant what you're doing with your life. And this generation Y, the problem nowadays is that when you look at traditional organizations, when you look at the Bains and the McKinseys and the Goldman Sachs, you know they follow this old hierarchy of needs. Who of you have seen this hierarchy of needs? Hand up. Okay, not bad. So it's the core idea that, you know, as a human being, you walk through different cycles of needs, right? You first want to fulfill your material needs, then your safety needs, then your emotional needs, then your esteem needs. And if you still have time at some point, you can self-actualize yourself, right? That's the meaning. It can come later, right? Look at someone like Bill Gates. Bill Gates, he first sets up Microsoft, and then later on the foundation, right? So he first does well, he first fulfills these bottom things, and then he does good. So it's a very linear approach to life, right? It is the approach where you subconsciously first think you have to make a lot of money first, until then, when you have the autonomy to actually do something which is really relevant to society. And what we thought is, well, no, we want to get away from this thinking. We understand that this generation Y question mark, is a generation that wants to fulfill these needs at the same time, so it's a circle, and also understand that this is relational. It depends a lot on the circles of the needs of others, how much we can do for ourselves. When you live in a collaborative environment where it's each project you will do, even if you're a developer somewhere in the basement, nowadays you have to have people around you with whom you work. So you want to be considerate of what that actually means to the people around you. And I want to show you 4 kind of cases of people who try to live a life that brings that together, all these things at the same time rather than after and after. One here is Sebastian Lindström. He's one of my personal favorites. He's one of these guys who I stayed with him in Nairobi for a month. And he would be one of these guys who jumps into your room at 7 o'clock in the morning and jumps over your bed, and then you're in the shower and he's hetero, he just jumps into the shower and like, hey! And so he's one of these people who just don't care, but in a good way. Who just don't accept like all these kind of boundaries which are somehow set by some, maybe for some reason. I mean, I'm not suggesting that that is a way you should do, but the point being that he's someone who really enjoys life, but he's also someone who really cares about stuff. And what he's doing with What Took You So Long, it's the foundation, and I recommend you to check it out. It's called the What Took You So Long Foundation. And what they did is they traveled 30 African countries on the search for unsung heroes. So they said the problem is that all these Ashoka people, all these tech fellow people, they are usually the ones who are at the top of the pyramid, right? That's the people who usually are visible already. But what do we do about these unsung heroes on the ground? These people in local communities who do the real stuff. And so he went with his whole team through these 30 different countries and documented these people on the ground. And then he used several platforms to travel the whole Western major cities to showcase these people, and to then connect them to people who have money, to people who have resources, and so on. So that's Sebastian. Robin Scott, she's doing a venture in London. It's called One Leap. And One Leap, what it does is basically, it matches people with ideas, so people like you, hopefully, some of you have some ideas, with people who have resources. So these people who are usually very hard to access, right? It's very hard to access someone like Bill Gates or so, because obviously it's a lot of people who want something from them. But the problem they have is they don't have a good filter to filter those ideas that are really good to get through to them. So what One Leap does is, it's an algorithm to get to these decision makers the best ideas. Eva Moore, they do an amazing organization in the US. Who of you came across Holstein? Hands up. Okay, so we have to change that. Because Holstein is one of the most inspiring organizations out there. What they said a few years ago is, well, eco-fashion, So, you know, like using kind of eco-materials for fashion and so on was always the kind of hippie fashion, right? It was always left and always somehow something you would not even consider. But they said, why don't we try to make this mainstream? And what they did was they wrote a manifesto. They sat at Central Park in New York. They were sitting there, they were thinking about what does life mean to us and how should that be translated in the organizations we work for. And they wrote that down. They had these kind of very simple, yet very, very powerful messages, right? Like life is short, make the best of it, and so on and so forth. This manifesto was downloaded over 80 million times. 80 million times. The Washington Post called it the new Just Do It. So they're kind of away from Nike, which is a bit the old school, towards the new Holstein school. And I think this is where we can see that the power of social media, the power of having a message which is shared by people comes in. And we will talk about that a little later, how you can create your own brand and how you can create your own career by having such an idea and then basically building a whole organization around this one manifesto. And then here you have Yuri Maxwell, who's a designer in Chicago, and who usually uses design to really have an impact on the local community they work with. So to really leverage their skill sets, get paid for it, but also have a real impact with what they do. And I think, I'm always forgetting that I have to keep this thing here. I hope we soon have this technology where in your finger you have this kind of, you can switch the slides with your fingers. Anyways, so what I want to talk about now, when you kind of have seen these cases, is what makes these people so successful, and particularly, how can it be that someone who's 24 years old, I mean, they're all 20-ish, how can it be that they already are at the level that they lead their own organizations, they have their own employees, they talk with the highest people in the existing organizations because they are on the same level? How can that be? And I think there is a certain things to it. Let's start with the non-success factors. I think, and again, when I say a viable career path as entrepreneur or social entrepreneur, it is not limited to entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs, right? There are a lot of intrapreneurs, right? People within big organizations who question things and who try to, within organizations, change a lot of things. And we'll come to that later, that the real change a lot of times happens not through the small ventures. The small ventures usually bring the ideas and then they inspire the big ventures, because sometimes you have a bigger venture like Cisco, which then puts all resources behind an idea, right? Look at something. Who of you came across telepresence? Hand up. Okay. Like briefly afterwards, I'll briefly show you a clip which you have to see, because it's basically bringing beaming Star Trek into our lives. So it's kind of, and this is a company like Cisco, which was inspired by an author. So it's literally, you can see that ideas are floating. But the point being that when I talk about entrepreneurship now, I use it in the biggest sense, in the broadest sense, talking also about entrepreneurs. So a lot of you will probably go into like the more traditional paths, but that you see that there is a way to, within even these paths, do something. So I believe that the non-success factors of not being successful, and when you turn that around, you get your success factors, is the first one is the choice of partner. Particularly when you set up a venture, but also when you have a team, a project team, or other things, I think people usually do the mistake that they select people based on their skill set, right? So let's say you work on a project in school or in university, you usually select your person based on, hey, do you have a web skill? Or hey, do you have a financial skill? Or hey, do you have a marketing skill? And then after a week you figure out, well, he has a tech skill, but he's an idiot, right? And then what happens? Well, you have to cut, right? And then the next person comes in, and so on. The point being, those people who are really successful understand that you want to take a few weeks longer to select the person that fits not only on the skill set, but also on the personality. And who's, for example, when you're a visionary, it should be an executor, it should be someone who really complements you. That also comes to for execution, because a lot of times, a lot of people have good ideas, but not so many people actually make that happen. Because not so many people who have good ideas are also good at actually executing them. So again, it comes to the people who have good ideas usually need someone who can actually execute on these ideas. To unbalanced teams will come in a bit, but I think the key point you will see with most successful entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs is perseverance, right? It's a very obvious one, but when you look at something like a venture, but also like a project team which gets a lot of responsibility, you will face a lot of obstacles along the way, right? But the point is that if you have the right partners around you, 1 or 2 team members, usually when you're low, they are up and vice versa, right? So you want to have people who also can bring you up again. So I cannot stress too much the importance of the team here. What people usually would say is that when you go to Silicon Valley, for example, or when you talk to CEOs, what they would say is that you would rather invest into a B idea with an A team than into an A idea with a B team. Which basically means no matter which project you do, the most important thing are the people, right? Because again, an idea changes, a project plan changes, a business plan changes, everything changes. But the team needs to adapt, right? So in the end, that is the most important thing to think about. The interesting thing is who of you wants to set up something at some point? Hands up. Okay, so that's approximately half of you. Who of you has set something up already? Hands up. Okay. Well, it's getting there. I mean, we'll kind of, so we have 4 already. We have around 20 who will get there. So I hope a few more even after the talk. So the point is that when you think about where do you find good people, let's say you start a project now, let's say you want to kind of pave your own career path now. The one is obviously personal introductions. I mean, I think a lot of people probably today also told you about the importance of meeting people, and not only meeting the people you need at a certain point in time, but usually you never know which resources you will need in a few years, right? So better meet the people today, become friends, and then in a few years you will usually see that a lot of things play out. So the importance of really building relationships and then getting introductions to the people who can really fit you. Events is the obvious one. I think the coolest thing you can do actually, if you want to do something really interesting, is to build a personal brand. So let's say you're 19, 20, 21, 22, and let's say you have a certain talent, whatever that is, right? Maybe it's building underwater robots, or maybe it's power sea fishing, or whatever it is a skill, right? And how that skill relates to what you want to do later, right? So let's say you want to become I don't hope so, but you want to become a great consultant, or whatever you want to become. Then try to relate these two. Try to relate your talents to your vision, and try to build a brand around that. Because the best thing you can do for you personally to enter doors is to not only participate at events, but to speak at events. So that you get into the role that somehow you're so interesting, maybe just because of a certain skill, or because of a certain thing you did, because of a certain viral campaign you did, that you're so interesting that people actually put you on stage, and then people will connect to you, right? You turn around, I come to you, you come to me. Interesting is obviously the kind of whole social media going viral. I mean, Holsey is an example of this, right? Within a few weeks, they had so many million views that afterwards they had never problems again of getting products sell or getting people to work with them. So these are all kind of things. And I think something you might want to look at are the more traditional things, especially internships. Who have you come across internships, Emma? Yeah. So internship, Raj, who's a great entrepreneur here in London, he set up a page where basically entrepreneurial interns can work with more startup type organizations, and then by that also get the possibility to meet co-founders and so on. So it's kind of matchmaking platform for that. One thing which is obviously very, very important no matter what you do, and I think this is something which might scare some of you, and I actually had a lot of red wine discussions with my girlfriend. She's doing psychology, and we're talking a lot about the pressures of modern life on our kind of mental health. And the whole point being that when you look at what's happening nowadays, organizations are getting less hierarchical and they get more networked, right? What it means when they get more networked is that you need to take on more responsibility because you need to manage micro projects. What that means is that even if you only have a functional specialization, in former times you could hide in a department, right? You could say, oh no, I'm just the accountant and I'm somewhere here in the back office. Well, this is changing more and more because if you have a micro team, you need to manage, and even if it's just 1 or 2 people, you need to try to manage, right? And even more important when you go into entrepreneurship, into the entrepreneurial arena, you somehow want to be able to lead people, and particularly to inspire people. And there's this one kind of fetish type video, which hopefully not so many of you have seen it. Who has seen the crazy dancing guy yet? Hand up. Damn it. Okay, so that's 1/4. Who of you shout if you don't want to see it again? Okay, I take that as I will show it for those 80% who haven't seen it yet.
About leadership and making a movement.
So it's basically, you have to imagine there's a guy who's standing on a kind of grass field, and the rest you see, and then we will briefly discuss what it actually means.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen, start to finish, in under 3 minutes, and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not 2 nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute, you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is over-glorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
And so this was not a flash mob or something which was pre-planned, but this was all organic, at least as they tell us. And who of you, like, what was your core learning from that? Like, if you would have to dissect one core learning, what was the one core learning, apart from the one he mentioned in the end?
That should be simple.
Yeah.
That should be simple.
Yes.
To follow.
Great. Yeah.
Get that first follower.
Get that first follower, yeah.
I was going to say, like, treat your first follower as an equal, not as a follower.
Yeah.
Be simple.
Be simple, yeah.
Leadership is over-glorified.
Yeah. Leadership is over-glorified.
Believe in yourself.
Believe in yourself.
Never underestimate.
Never underestimate someone, yeah. Very true.
It's okay to be a follower.
It's okay to be follower.
Don't be afraid to do stupid stuff.
Yeah. Most important one, yeah.
Follow makes leaders.
Followers makes leader, okay, yeah.
You should enjoy every day.
Mm-hmm.
Be passionate about your vision.
Yeah.
It's not about you, it's about the idea.
Yeah. And I think that's a very, very nice closing note, because that's what I think all of you made very, very good points. And I think one of the things you see when we link that back to what we talked about network structures is also that when you work in teams, even if you're the leader, or if you want to see who's a good leader, you will see that they make it about the idea and not about themselves, right? Someone who has to show authority usually doesn't have a lot of informal power, right? That's the ones who need to build on their authority. So the point being that in these times nowadays, where's this? Yeah, we want to be exactly as kind of, I think you dissected it very well. We want to be very sure that we don't have this Ashoka Tedfellow type syndrome where you glorify individuals. And for a good reason, right? You need role models and you need people who are out there. But you also need to showcase that in the end it's the team, right? When you look at someone like Steve Jobs, or when you look at someone like the Google founders, there's usually one or two people in the background, right? With Apple, that's Steve Wozniak, who's in the background, basically executing. I mean, I don't think Steve Jobs has, I mean, these people have the great ideas, right? But usually in the background, you have the people who actually execute on them. And again, the importance of the team, and particularly the first follower in that respect. So either if you're the leader, that you nurture these people by having let them idea ownership, right? Or, on the other hand, if you're the follower, to really embrace these ideas and go forward. This is a very simple model. I don't want to bore you with academic stuff. If you're ever interested, come over to the LSE, do a master's, and we'll talk about that more. I don't get paid for that. I was asking them for a commission, but it didn't really work. The question is what makes a good team, right? What makes a good project team? What makes a good founding team? And it always comes back to what we said before, right? People usually select teams based on their functional expertise, and they forget to select them based on what is a complementary personality. Because in the end, you look at complementarity. If you have someone who's a real shaper, so who's really shaping ideas, this person needs someone who actually implements them. They need someone who monitors them, they need a specialist who actually goes deep into individual pockets, and so on. And the key learnings, I think, over the last years, so particularly also when looking at something like Sandbox, which was a venture itself, and which came from an idea stage to a scale stage, is really that, some of you mentioned it very well, that passion and drive is everything, right? I mean, why would you do something if you're not really passionate about it? A lot of people do it for the money, which is fair, right? You have to pay back student debts and so on. But the point being that this is nothing which will keep you running, right? I mean, a lot of people get burned out nowadays and so on. So it's not necessarily because they work so much. It's because they work with things where they have a cognitive dissonance, where they have something where they don't feel it's right, okay? And this is something where I'm very glad to my kind of psychology partner to learn about these things. That literally, it is not only about how proud you feel about yourself, but it's literally about your mental health as well. It has real implications that you choose something where you feel really comfortable about. When you set up a venture, that's a lot around sweat equity, right? I mean, how do you give idea ownership to people? How do you give, who of you know what sweat equity is? Stand up. Who of you can explain what sweat equity is? No? I can't give grades. If I could say now you get a distinction if you say it, then maybe 5 hands would go up. No, okay, so sweat equity is the whole idea that when you set up a venture, a young venture, you have a certain, if you make it into a public limited, or if you make it into a limited, you have a certain portfolio of shares you can give out, right? A certain part of the company which is owned then by certain people. And the point is that wants to own this 100%. So they say, based on how much you work, or based on how much you do, you get a certain percentage of this company. And the point is that obviously you're much more motivated to work for something which you actually own. So the point is that this is an incentive mechanism which can work. It can also lead to a lot of conflicts. So it is very much advised to, when you do something like sweat equity, or it is also more broader when you have incentive structures within a project team, to always have incentive structures which are not too redistributive, right? If they redistribute too much from one to the other, it will always lead to conflict, right? Because it means the one person who's doing more will then get more of the pie. What you want to have is something which increases the whole pie and then gives you a relatively higher share of this whole pie. So the point being that in the end you want to think about a structured process whenever you think about incentives. Never go in and come in with an idiosyncratic approach. Rather ask some advisors to have a structured approach.
Prioritization is king. I think all of you, who of you are working constantly in project teams? Hands up. Yeah, that's probably, and yeah, there's probably quite a few. What you will see is that there is always so many things to do, right? It's like in university. I mean, when you look at the British university system, me coming from the German one, it was very interesting to see that not even when you would want it, you could read all the readings, right? It's just not like it's not possible humanly. And the point being that, well, but that is part of the key, that you read the core readings, but the further readings are there for you to pick what is most relevant, and it is all about prioritization. The same applies to when you think about the startup. When you come or to a project team, you have to prioritize your goals in a way which makes sense, and particularly also overcome opportunity cost thinking, right? Who of you know what that could be, opportunity cost thinking? Hands up. Who of you are economists? Hands up. Okay. So basically, who of you knows what opportunity cost is? Hands up. Okay, cool. Let's start there. So opportunity cost being the cost you somehow have in terms of relative to something else, right? So let's say you could have, today when you're here, you could have had a good time with your boyfriend, girlfriend. Or you could have gone to the swimming pool, or you could have done everything, right? So your opportunity costs are the things you could have done, right? The problem is when you're an entrepreneur, when you're an intrapreneur, when you do exciting things, there's always something else interesting you could do. And the point is that you need to get out of the idea that you constantly think about what you could have done or what you could do, because this slows you down. This comes back to the prioritization. If you prioritize things very clearly, then you don't have cognitive dissonance. Then you don't think about, oh, should I really do this thing now versus this thing, because you prioritize them already. In terms of the tools, I don't know who of you, just to facilitate for you, wherever, when you work in project groups or when you work in teams, that can be in school teams, that can be everywhere. These are some of the free tools which you can use for when you work. The one is Basecamp, which is project management tools. It's quite easy as a group to work with. Google Docs is the very simple one, which works on Gmail, which helps you to have documents shared in real time, right? You can directly work on the same Word document or on the same Excel sheet and so on. Highrise is a great invention. It's basically a cloud-based, so it's something which is not on one server, but it's kind of out there in the internet cloud. And what it does is basically, what you will see is when you do interesting things, you will always meet more people than you can potentially keep in touch with. And you will always meet so many people that a lot of times you don't really remember what you actually discussed with a lot of people specifically. And particularly when you work in teams, you usually want to be aware of what was discussed with this specific person by another team member of yours, right? A lot of times team members go into meetings with people and are not aware what was actually discussed before with the other team member. What Highrise does is you can BCC emails to a certain person, and then this gets added to a display, and then everyone within the team can exactly see which was the conversation with this person. You can tag that person. You can tag that person with certain things like sponsorship, like whatever it is, and then if you click within the system on sponsorship, you see all the people who were potential sponsors and exactly what was the communication with them. And you can use that for a lot of other things. So it helped us a lot to structure our contacts and to really work much more effectively with it. And then Yammer is a good internal tool for communicating internally. In terms of the networks, for you, when you kind of get now into the spirit of wanting to be successful and wanting to be significant and getting into the right mood, there's different networks which could be interesting. One is the co-founder network. It's a network which brings together people who have ideas with people who want to co-found something but who maybe don't have the idea yet. You have Startup Weekend, which is about people pitching ideas during a weekend and really work on their ideas over the whole weekend and ideally come out with a company after a whole weekend. Tech Hub is about kind of a collaborative space where you can work from as a tech entrepreneur. The Hub is for social entrepreneurs, where you can be and kind of have contact with social entrepreneurs particularly. They have a lot of events as well, so it's definitely recommended to check that out, particularly the Hub Westminster. European Student Startups, Startup Pirates, and Make Sense London is very cool for social entrepreneurs. So any of these, if you Google it, there's a lot of information you will get out of it. I think before jumping to telepresence, I want to really make you think about that if you think about your life, let's say this arrow is your life. And let's say, who of you is born 87? Okay, who of you is born 89? All right, okay. So let's say, I mean, imagine whatever age or whatever date you're born is on the left, right? The arrow is your life. And let's say you die in like maybe 65 years or give and take 20 years. But let's say the arrow represents your life. And these arrows here represent the lives of the people around you. Right? The people before you, your parents maybe before here, the people after you. And what you want to do is you want to leave something which goes beyond. Right? If you want to do something in your life which really has an impact, it ideally leaves something which after your death will leave something behind. Not only what's written on your graveyard, but also what you actually did with your life. And if there was one key message I wanted to give you today, it's really to think very consciously. I mean, all these practical tools are nice, but you need to have your own vision of what you actually want to do with your life. You don't have to do it today or tomorrow, but you want to consciously think about what you actually want to do with your life. And I want to leave you with my favorite quote of Margaret Mead, who said that you should never doubt that a group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world, because indeed it is the only thing that ever has. Everything big in history was changed by 1, 2, 3, 4 people. And this is what I think the real power of ideas and cool people is. Before I say goodbye, I really want to show you this telepresence video. Do we have something where we can YouTube?
Yeah, it's in Chinese, so I'll have to use my best Chinese.
And so far, maybe YouTube. I like that multicultural approach. It's called Cisco telepresence. So far, I mean, do you guys have any questions so far, or any assaults, or anything you always wanted to put out there? Anything? Yes? Yeah.
When you said the last part that to do something that would continue after we die, I just remembered something that basically I'm a Muslim, and in Islam this is the core concept that why are we created, why are we put on earth, not only to worship God because angels were created only to worship God, but to do something that would continue after we die, to do something that's for the betterment of the creation, whether humans, even everything. So I just wanted to point this out.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I think that's a beautiful thought that a lot of religions, particularly Islam, also kind of stimulate that thinking, right? That you really should leave something on this planet which goes beyond you in that sense. Yeah?
What do you wish to leave behind as your legacy?
That's a good question. And I think, I mean, it will probably...
You're asking us, I'm asking you.
Yeah. No, fair question. I think it will change each 2 or 3 years. I think it's more about the process of thinking about it. For me personally, I mean, when I think about my passion, I think passion and vision are very related. It's about building platforms for people to make their ideas happen. So when I'm dead, I want that Sandbox goes on for people to really make their ideas happen. So I want to build platforms. And I think when I die, I want to have the feeling that there are some platforms out there that really enable people to make their ideas happen. Ideally in a positive kind of social impact way, but that's I leave to the emerging nature of it. But I think for me it's about platforms and about social change. Others?
Quick one.
Questions? Yeah.
Do you think anybody can become a leader?
Well, the questions of the video also, does everyone have to become a leader? Right? Sure. And the point is, I mean, from which perspective are you approaching it?
In the nature versus nurture debate, and the fact that is it something innate that you have in you? Is it your upbringing? Where does that, the spark and the flint and everything, where does that come from?
Yeah. It's a really good question because I get that question a lot around entrepreneurship. Are entrepreneurs born, or are they bred, or are they made? And I think for me the answer lies in the middle. Basically, I believe the justification of why we can actually teach leadership and why we can teach entrepreneurship is that we believe that on the one hand side, yes, there are some people who intuitively, maybe genetically, are somehow in the spirit of being kind of like a bit more in having certain talents grounded. But also that's how they brought up. I mean, when you look at a lot of American schools, what they do really well is you have to present your teddy bear when you're 5 years old in front of the whole kindergarten, right? So it's like, okay, go out there and present the teddy bear. And these small things where you say that you put people into a position where they have to somehow show leadership. And then you get them triggered to, there's this nice quote which says that you only know how strong you are once you really need to be strong. And I think this is something, especially people who are really modest. And I mean, again, I think my girlfriend for me is that basically, if I would not from time to time put her into a position, she would not assume that she could actually do it. And I think this is something which might be different for some people who are a bit more kind of self-confident, who say, yes, I really want to make it happen, I will make it happen. And I think both have their merits, but when you think about what makes it in the end is that I think you can train at least the process of approaching it. So the process of what we saw earlier, right? What makes a leader is having an idea which can spread. You can think consciously about an idea which could spread, right? You can consciously put some things in place. And then, in the end, I mean, again, not everyone has to be the kind of visionary leader at the front. So I think it's, the truth is in the middle, probably. Yeah.
I think this is going to sound really rude, but it's not meant to be. But, I mean, the conference is about redefining success, but do you really think everybody has to, like, leave a legacy to be successful?
It's a beautiful question, because it also comes back to this obsession that people feel. I've seen that a lot actually in London, where it's a lot about personal brand building versus kind of doing sustainable things and doing things which actually kind of keep on, like on a lower level. I mean, when you think about scientific discoveries, right? When you think about where you have teams, we actually, so I was curating TEDx LSE, and we had today actually, and we had a speaker in the morning who was, the moderator, she was the inventor of Viagra, right? But when she talks about it, she was saying, well, I get all the credit, like the leadership guy, right? But it was 1,500 people in the background who actually worked on it. 1,500 people. And if these 1,500 people would have the need to somehow define their success in a way which she defined it, which was basically, I want to be out there, I want to be seen, then yes, it wouldn't have worked. So the point is, I think, success, and this is why I said success and significance, in terms of your own significance towards yourself. I think it comes back to a lot of the religious ideas around that it's not about necessarily, you know, everyone for us should define their success for themselves. I think the redefinition for me comes a lot in the sense that there shouldn't be a kind of societal definition of what is success and what should we be, and then kind of having an ideological discussion about what is success, but rather saying, no, it's more about being aware that I'm in this life for a reason, and what is my reason to be in this life, and then defining success for whatever you want to do with your life. Does that answer the question? No? Yeah, perfect. But it wasn't assaulting at all. I mean, I think it was a very beautiful question. Yeah.
I found, firstly, I'd like to say I found your talk really interesting and sort of it opened my mind to a lot of things. But how would you go about telling younger people this, in the sense, even from primary school into secondary school? How would you explain things like this to them? Because for them, in the education system, it's very narrow-minded, and success is defined for them rather than them defining success for themselves. So, in my own personal view, it's never taught in schools, or I've never experienced it, and this is the first time I've been sort of open to this. But how would you go about telling younger people this in the way that they would be affected?
Yeah. I think it's a very good question. Who of you came across Ken Robinson's talk at TED? Yeah, so I share his views in that respect. That the problem of a lot of education systems, the German education system, the UK education system, is that they educate you out of creativity, right? They basically, it's this idea of putting things into a box and then like somehow measuring what's in the box, and then success is this kind of objective measure of the box, right? Whereas I like this, there's a really nice caricature. This is like a graphic where you, my English sometimes, it's Viktor Frankl said it beautifully. He said basically that, please excuse my terrible accent without the slightest English, or something like that. It was also a joke. But But the point being that I think when I think about my school life, it was also like this. I was one of these kids who I had to repeat the school year because I was literally not accepting that this would actually make sense what we did, because I was asking them, why would I do all these like calculations with ×8 when my calculator can do it? I mean, why would I do it, right? And tell me rather why is that important versus do it and do the what, right? And when you think about Simon Sinek's talk, for example, at TED, also you should all Google it. It's basically, he says start with a why, don't start with a what. But the problem with school is it starts with a what and never goes to the why. And I think that the core point is when you look at someone like Ken Robinson, he's very good in thinking about how do you actually not put people into a box and then measure some type of success which has been set up 60 or 70 years ago, but rather adapt to new times. And I think this is something we're experimenting a lot with actually. And also I think those of you who are really interested in that topic, there are some of these new organizations called Super Cool School or Udemy, where people can set up their own schools and experiment with alternative grading systems, alternative schooling, and then once this is successful, I think then the old schools will take over. So I think for the moment, my way to explain it to you, I actually was last week at an interesting school with 15-year-olds. So it's kind of this interesting age where people feel very rebellious and people feel very, I want to challenge. And it was interesting because I felt it's interesting when you're there because you have to tell them on the one hand side, look, for the moment you somehow have to be in this box because otherwise you can't be outside the box later. Because the outside the box later depends on how well you do in the box at the moment, unless you become an entrepreneur. This is why I'm stressing this entrepreneur thing so much, because it is one of the ways to climb outside the box early on. But I think, there is no easy answer because I think in the end it comes back, I really advise you to all watch this talk of Ken Robinson to go about it in terms of how do you actually try to redefine education and to rethink how we go about education. Because when you look at something, when we teach, a lot of the entrepreneurship teaching we do, we exactly try to not do that. We send students into the field to work with entrepreneurs. Because we believe, well, you can tell them a lot about what uncertainty means, but until you feel it, you never know what uncertainty is. And these kind of things. So I think, a very good question. I think there's no easy answer to that. Does it answer it still? Okay.
I'm 15, by the way.
Oh, okay. Wow, you seem much more older, yeah. Good job, man. Okay, before I finish, I want to show you something which hopefully will come back at some point.
Need a password.
If we get the password. Yeah, I just have to very briefly because,
Yeah, so I can see that everyone's really kind of passionate about education and how we can really change it and find success. I think one thing we haven't really touched on is socioeconomic background and how that limits success. Like how do you think we can go about kind of addressing that problem of like kind of poor socioeconomic background?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And, I don't know who of you came across. So the government has been doing something around trying to get some community champions into local communities and say then, and I believe it comes, so the question was basically, how can we open up these questions much more to socioeconomic backgrounds which might be less privileged? And I think a lot of it comes back to the question of local role models. I think it's, when you look at some of the most interesting kind of entrepreneurs who came out of Britain, some of them were kind of coming out of these really tough circumstances and had to be really genuine and creative to get out there. And I think highlighting these career paths and saying, look, this is a guy who kind of came out of this part of London. I can't say specific districts now because otherwise people will slam me later on these districts. But the point being, if you have people who came out there, really profiling their CVs and how they got out there. And I think for one of the next conferences, it could be really interesting to say, like, look at 10 of the role models coming out of these communities and say how they came out of it. Actually, I want to have the thought, but we then probably really have to get it going. Because a lot of the work I've been doing was in the slums of Kibera in Nairobi and in the townships of South Africa. And the interesting thing is that when we talk about poverty here, it is very relative to how it looks there, right? There it's literally like poverty. And the interesting thing there is that they come up with some of the most brilliant solutions out of necessity, because they say, well, there's nothing else, there's no opportunity, so I have to create my own opportunity. And I think what we tried to do there a lot was highlighting these few who came out there, so to show others that it's actually possible to get out there. And I believe a lot in creating these role models and really and doing that. Yeah. Okay, and then now I want to show you this telepresence, which wait, 1 second. It was basically, when I saw that, I was like, wow, this is really has the potential to redefine what we're doing. Think about when you watch it. Think about what that means for how you work, how organizations work, how the world works, and yeah, think about the implications of what you see.
Innovation is the key to the world's future. And one of the exciting things about India is the young people in the education systems allow people to think out of the box about new ideas. At Cisco, we pride ourselves in bringing out new products and new capabilities. And we have an innovation center that is able to bring new products to market very quickly. We asked this group called Emerging Technologies to think like Star Trek and suddenly allow us to communicate wherever we are in the world to deliver services to our customers virtually. And we had a person by the name of Martin DeBeer head this up, and Martin was going to be here today, except that he had to be doing a small acquisition back at home office, and he was also teaching a leadership class. Martin, I just wish you could be here. Martin, is that you?
Hi, John.
How are you doing?
That's me.
It's good to see you.
Namaste.
Yes, sir. You know, it's amazing. I thought you were teaching classes in San Jose. Where are you?
John, I'm actually in California, 14,000 miles away. And it is very early in the morning here, but I'm delighted to be joining you today for this fantastic event in India.
So we showed Professor Kalam earlier the capability to do healthcare remotely by using video, but you're really talking about the ability to virtually not only have meetings together, but I can see you like you're right in front of me.
Correct, John. As you know, telepresence is about bringing people together around a virtual table. And what we're showcasing here today for the first time is an on-stage experience where any resource can be anywhere in the world on demand.
So your ability not only to give speeches like this in the future, but all of a sudden to have doctors come as though they were physically there with the patient, or the ability to bring groups together to not only communicate and counsel quicker, but to change things. Now, Martin, how does this work? Tell me how you did this and how your team did it.
Well, John, as you know, our technology is very, very powerful in the way that it can put you virtually in a different location using very high-definition video and full spatial audio technologies. And of course, this is very important in business. As we globalize, we need to transform our business models in order to scale our resources anywhere in the world, put our best talent in front of our customers at a moment's notice. And that is what telepresence is all about. It will allow us to transform our business. It will allow us to innovate in new ways and to draw upon the collective wisdom of talent that may be anywhere in the world, including in India.
So Martin, I know that we've already done 28,000 meetings at Cisco by using telepresence. And you gave me a forecast of making it $1 billion in 3 years in terms of orders. Are we on track for that?
John, I can say we are on track for that, and the customer interest we are seeing is absolutely phenomenal, and it's growing every day. And I think as we continue to extend the experience.
All right, so what do you guys think? What does that mean for how you think about organizations, business, your careers?
Anything is possible.
Anything is possible? Yeah? Others?
We can basically be superheroes.
Yeah? Yeah?
We can be so much more flexible in our working patterns and the way we live our lives.
Yeah, very true.
Like save loads and loads of air miles.
Very true. And lots of air miles to be saved, yeah?
Reducing costs.
Yes, reducing costs.
Technology is powerful.
Technology is powerful. And especially, you know who came up basically with the initial idea of this? Well, the author of Star Trek, right? I mean, like they were beaming like Scotty already. What? Decades ago. And everyone was like, oh yeah, that's science fiction. Well, we see that it's science fiction, right? So the point being, surrounding yourself with people who inspire you, and sometimes that's the authors, sometimes there's others. That comes back to the importance of meeting people. Apropos meeting people, I mean, Stephen, a very good friend of mine, will speak later, and he's one of the super networkers. So I think he will be telling you a lot about why actually it is so significant to have the right interactions and the right thing. But well, I want to leave you now with this kind of thought that everything is possible, and particularly that everything can be possible if you really think consciously about what you want to do with your life. Thank you so much.